Even the very hairs on your head are all numbered. But don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. While making that point, Jesus does also show God's care for the sparrow. We worry about the numbers of hair, the number of hairs on our heads. Well, some of us might. It's easier for God to count these days. Or at least I thought it was. Until a scientist discovered, by looking through a microscope at somebody's scalp, that actually the hairs don't disappear. They're still there, but much, much thinner, so you can't see them. So the number is still the same. God cares for us. Make no mistake, whatever we might say that seems to be to the contrary, and whatever I might say today that may seem to devalue the value of human beings, I'm not saying that, but hopefully helping to lift up the value in our minds of the rest of creation. For a long time, the Church has done a great job in devaluing creation. More by neglect than willfully, but it has been done. Man is the crown of creation, or man and woman, the crown of creation. And the interpretation for so long was that the rest of creation was put in place to serve our purposes. We are learning that we are very much a part of creation. We have our role to play, and it's an important role. But so does the rest of the created world. And if we are the most important of all creation, well, how does that connect us, for instance, to the stars that we can see at night shining brightly, whose light actually started on its journey towards us years, maybe centuries ago, maybe billions of years ago. But all that is there to serve the purposes of humankind. Well, we enjoy seeing the twinkling of the lights in the night sky, when the sky is not too polluted. But apart from that, we are not masters of that sky. God is. And God is the master, being the creator of this world also. And God is sovereign Lord of us all too. And God knows the things that God has made intimately, so well that Jesus himself could say, God knows each one of those sparrows. Look around you and see the birds, and they were visible to the people as they listened to him out in the open air. Every one of them, God knows them. Maybe gives them a name too. And there are other creatures, even smaller, the insects and those that we can't even see unless we use a microscope. We are part of that created order, but God cares for the whole of creation. And God calls us to care for the whole of the created order around us. That surely is a message that reaches us from the Bible right from its outset. The first and second chapters of Genesis, where the relationship between God and humankind, and God and the world around, is described through the stories of the creation. So it is care for creation that is really the theme, and our part in caring for it. You might think I took a bit of a risk in choosing, because I did choose the two New Testament readings, in choosing the reading from the letter to the Romans. There are some among us who choose only to eat vegetables. But they must not despise those who also eat meat. It was just over 3 months ago that I decided to dispense with eating meat, to have no more meat, no milk, no dairy products, no eggs, and to survive by eating only vegetables. So, does Paul have a word for me there? Well, I'm not sure that this was quite what he was getting at. There was something more significant theologically in what he was saying there, and it had to do with meeting with other religions, other faiths. The point about that passage was that when you went to the market to buy meat, the chances were that meat would have been slaughtered by the temple authorities of another religion. They were the ones who were responsible for it, because even other faiths recognized the divinity of life. The presence of God, or a God of some sort, that had given life to those animals, and so there must be some kind of respect given when they were slaughtered. Christians would say, well, we can't have meat that's been slaughtered in a pagan temple or by pagans when they have been following certain religious rites. This was the reason why many refused to eat meat, because they did not want meat that had been tainted. Paul was saying, well, yes, you Christians, okay, you know better, those of you who are experienced, you know better, because you know there is only one God, and there is only one God who can bless whatever activities we take part in. And you may say that whatever other people try to do in terms of blessings from other gods or whatever, that counts for nothing. And that's true. Our God is God of all, and the value of the meat will not be reduced, however it is slaughtered, whatever way it's slaughtered. Well, that was the dilemma that people faced then. And then there were also arguments going on in the church. People who will say, well, they eat meat that's been that's come from the market and it's tainted, but we don't. So we're better Christians, and we look down on them. There was to be none of this. We are all on a journey. They were all on a journey in that church too in Rome, making discoveries together about what was right, what was wrong in their lives, what they had to change, what was different now that they had come to know the Lord Jesus. They were on that journey of discovery. They had different opinions. Different opinions held for often very good reasons on both sides. Was there one final correct answer? Paul was certainly showing that there were several answers here. If there are those who feel that way about the meat and don't want to eat it, then the others should respect their position. We should all learn to respect each other's opinions and positions, especially, or certainly, on things that do not involve sinfulness on our part. Of course, there should be discipline within the church. There should be discipline among its members. But even in that, we all fall short and need to confess and to repent. There needed to be repentance, didn't there, among the people of Israel as they journeyed towards their promised land. As I said, my favourite part of that passage as I read it through was actually a part that was cut out from the lectionary reading for today. But I couldn't miss out on that. The Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it. You've been complaining so much. The cucumbers, the onions, the garlic, and all the things that they had had in Egypt. And they were missing it so much. The Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it, not just for one day, or 2 days, or 5, 10, or 20 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it. I think that's the literal translation, and the translation that we had was the more English phrase that we would often use: eating so much food till it comes out of your ears. The literal translation is closer to the possible, but that's the way that we would say it. That's our phrase. You'll have meat till it comes out of your ears. Well, clearly they were not happy about their diet. They wanted more flavour. Couldn't even get onions there in the wilderness, or garlic. Of course, a Buddhist would say to you, don't eat onions and garlic. It's not correct. If you're a vegetarian, that's not part of a Buddhist vegetarian diet. The people were craving for the food and the flavours that they had before. And they complained. Even when God gave them food in the wilderness because they were feeling hungry, they complained about that food. It looked like coriander seed. Well, coriander seed is quite a nice flavouring, an important part of a good curry. but it looked like resin, sort of sticky stuff that comes out of the surface of a tree if you cut it. They didn't like the look of it, they didn't like the flavour. It wasn't nicely presented by God. He wasn't offering them the services of a really good 5-star restaurant. They were complaining. Moses turns to God and he said, "What can I do with these people? God, why did you land all this on me?" And he complains too. Well, so God offers meat for a month until it came out of their ears. Well, there is a lot of discussion in my family, and when we meet with others, and maybe you'll get some of this as well from time to time, about what we should eat and what we shouldn't eat, and what's good for us, and why. I want to say something about the why. I decided not to be vegetarian simply, but vegan. A vegetarian can be a lacto-vegetarian or an ovo-vegetarian, or both. Lacto means milk, so you can eat dairy products and drink milk. Ovo means eggs, so you can eat eggs as well. But I chose not to, and I'll tell you why. But first of all, I had 5, or at least now I have 5 main reasons for making that change in my life. Apart from, of course, the first one, which was that Pei-Ling started reading the books and trying to persuade me right from the beginning of the year. Well, I've got 5 reasons here that I've noted down. There's cruelty to animals. The religious rites of certain religions, including Judaism and Islam, but Christianity doesn't have any particular special methods of killing. The religious rites of Judaism, following from that, Islam as well, are intended to ensure that animals that are slaughtered for eating are slaughtered with the greatest speed and the least possible pain. There was a case not long ago when a slaughterhouse in America was found to be causing animals a lot of pain. And it was supposed to be a slaughterhouse which provided meat for the Jewish community. The rabbis saw what was happening and they made their complaints very strongly. Oh yes, they were cutting in the right way, they were draining the blood, they were doing the right things, but some of the workers were being pretty cruel to the animals when they arrived. They were kicking them around, they were pushing them, they were probably making the animals more terrified than any of us would be if we saw it being done. Religious rites, religious ways of doing things have been developed in order to reduce cruelty. Today, we cannot get away from the fact that, as ever, killing an animal involves pain. But also today, animals that are meant for food are, in the vast majority of cases, kept in conditions that would cause revulsion, I am sure, among each and every one of us if we saw it. Cows, pigs, chickens are pushed together in buildings that are not big enough to house them, but the profit motive is such that they are squeezed into cages more and more, squashed together with tiers above each other. There is pain involved in the processing of meat right from before the moment of birth, because the cows, the pigs giving birth also live in the same kind of squalid conditions. So there's cruelty involved. Some might say, well, you think about that, that's kind of sentimental, that's a bit emotional. It's not actually the first point or the number one reason that I followed to get to the point where I am now. Second reason for being challenged in this was learning that getting protein from animals, the protein that we need, we do need it, is about 1/20th of the efficiency of getting it from plants. You have to use so much more land to grow the food, to feed the animals in the first place. It's inefficient. To get protein from meat is 1/20th of the efficiency of getting protein from plants. That means that huge amounts of land are wasted. Wasted because, well, we could get protein from 1/20th of the land. We have to grow so much more to make the animals grow. And we don't have enough food. With the current methods of production, to feed the world in a time of drought. And we get times of drought. America is experiencing one and has been experiencing a drought for the last 4 years or more. Because of this, a huge reservoir which goes under, I don't know, maybe 10 of the American states, a huge reserve of water is being tapped and exhausted to grow the crops that are needed to feed the animals. About half of the food crops grown in America, and these are the statistics I've got because it's books by American writers that I've been reading. But factory farming is spreading, and I noticed in one book that on the list of those that have factory farming as their main production, it mentioned America, and then it said Taiwan is almost at the same level. Now that surprised me. Then I thought about it and thought, how many cows have I seen running around? I've even been to dairy farms. Saw about 10 bulls. That's all. Today, there is drought in America, and I think fear. America is trying to do all kinds of things at once with its land. It is growing crops. Half of the food crops that are being grown are for the animals. But overall, 40% of the corn that's grown in America, for the sake of security, 40% of the corn grown in America is turned into ethanol. for running cars. America now feels happy because it has fuel security and does not have to depend on the Middle East for its fuel supplies. Although it is still drawing plenty from that direction too. The topsoil, I'm told, which was about that deep, producing crops in the past under traditional methods. Now that the land is used for one crop, huge, huge fields, using genetics, GMOs, fertilizers, pesticides, the topsoil is now, from having been about 2 feet deep, about 6 inches, 15 centimeters, over vast areas of the United States. And that worries people in America. It should worry the rest of the world too, because America, up till now, or until recently, has been the biggest exporter of food to countries that need it because they don't have enough land to grow their own. So growing food for animals inefficiently is actually going to mean starvation for countless millions of people in the world. The other thing I was concerned about, number 3, was greenhouse gas emissions. I never realised. I've been thinking about riding my bike more, cutting down on using the car, not using the air conditioners quite as much, doing whatever I can. Factory farming and CO2 and methane emissions which come from factory farmed animals produces as much greenhouse gas as all the transport in the world. Of course, there is still need to reduce our use for transport, for air conditioning, lighting, and all sorts of other things as much as we can, and to turn over to solar power as our resource for electricity. But this is a big factor in global warming. Factory farming, which is where most of our meat comes from. The fourth one, I haven't come to my own personal health yet, because I didn't consider that was number 1 priority at any time. But a fourth one that came to my notice recently is perhaps as frightening, if not more frightening, than the rest. The World Health Organization collectively is frightened, if not terrified, about the possibility of a new pandemic, worse than the one that hit the world in 1918 and killed up to 50 million people. It was an epidemic of flu, influenza, which spread right round the world at a time when many people were weakened by war. It was only recently discovered to have been bird flu. Someone did some analysis of some bodies which had been preserved in the ice of a very cold part of the world, discovered that it was H1 something flu. It was a bird flu. And we know that scientists have been concerned about viruses that may transform themselves as viruses do every day, and become the generator of a new pandemic. Came here nearly 10 years ago. 2003 was the year of SARS. And I remember the fear that there was right around this country. Nobody knew whether it would go away, how many people would be killed, because it seemed to kill a very large proportion of those who got it. People were staying away from crowded places. The department stores were almost empty. They were the least crowded I found. People were terrified. Everyone was going around wearing masks. If somebody sneezed, they drew back. Reminiscent, maybe if you look at the history of the plague sweeping through Europe and other parts of the world back in the 17th century. If somebody sneezed, for many that was going to be the last time they met. And the response was, God bless you. That is why when someone sneezes today we say God bless you. It comes from the 17th century plague, when people were being loaded onto carts and dragged away to mass graves from the cities of Europe. A poultry farm, and there are lots of them near here. A poultry farm holding thousands of chickens is about the best breeding ground you could ever imagine for a new bird virus to develop. The birds are weak. They're weak because they've been bred to produce meat and lots of eggs. Well, not together. They've been bred in two parts. Some chickens are bred for meat, so they grow fat within 39 days. Others are meant to produce twice as many eggs, or more than twice as many eggs than chickens were ever supposed to. They are crammed together in small spaces, up to 50,000 in one shed. Every day in a farm like that, if you can call them farms, they have to go through and carry out the dead. Because they're so crowded together, they often suffocate each other. They fall over, they break their legs because they're too heavy. And they die because they can't reach the food. The people who own such places do it because they don't have any other means of income, more often than not. And they get sick too, as do people living near other production units for pigs and cows. The smell, I understand, is quite intense. With the smell comes disease. The WHO, World Health Organization, is terrified that these chicken farms and the pig farms and cattle farms as well will produce the next generation virus to infect the world. And now the world's population is crammed together more than ever before in big cities. The possibility of such a pandemic has reached emergency proportions. The other day someone was taken from, I think it was Qatar, to a hospital in Britain under intense supervision. Had a virus that they couldn't identify. One person died. So far, there's no report of it having spread. A professor in the university in London says he doesn't think after all this is going to be serious. It doesn't spread like other viruses do. So there's relief, but it was in the news last week. You may have seen it. It was in the news that there had been 1 or 2 cases. I think that may tell us something about how frightened the professionals are. 1 or 2 cases, and it hits the headlines. Well, my 5th challenge was personal health, and Pei-Ling has been telling me day by day in the books that she's been reading about all the things that can happen to you if you have just vegetables, and how good they are for you, and how healthy, and how you can overcome, how people have written about how they've overcome cancers, how they have avoided heart disease, strokes, actually how whole communities and nations have been more healthy in the time before meat became fashionable. And it has become a fashion, because rich countries eat lots of meat, especially rich countries. So, a sign that you're becoming wealthy is that you have more meat in your diet. It is sweeping around the world. In China, I think it's frightening, the development, the potential for development of the meat industry in China. A country which has not had so much heart disease until now. A country where people didn't suffer from so many strokes and similar illnesses. Kinds of major illnesses that have been brought on and increased by increased consumption of meat, milk and eggs. So, to live a longer life, and for that life to be more healthy to the end, surely it's something that we would all strive for, if we could. The fact is, we can. Because if you cut meat out of your diet now, the past is forgiven. Largely. You can overcome some of the diseases that you may already have. So it sounds good to me, and I haven't found anything to the contrary. One of the writers whose book I've been reading said he started on this road when his son was born, and he wanted to know what would be the best food for his son, and he did some research. He was a journalist and a novelist. He's written this book called Eating Animals. He wanted to know whether there were any negative effects of just eating vegetables. looked into it in great detail. He hasn't found any yet. Okay, you may have to be careful to include certain things in your diet so that you don't run short of them. But generally, if you eat a reasonable range of vegetables, mushrooms, I'm really into mushrooms, I like mushrooms, and these things, all kinds of plant foods. If you have a reasonable variety, then you're almost certain of getting everything that you need, and certainly the protein. I suppose one thing that really, after putting these things in order and recognizing, yes, well, personal health, okay, but global warming, I'm campaigning for that for a long time, to reduce global CO2 greenhouse gas emissions. Hunger. I have a very strong feeling for those who are hungry, that I have seen, having lived for 4 years in Bangladesh. It was important to me, and I put that at the top of my priorities. But then if you start thinking about the virus issue, surely we've got to be so careful about that. The danger is there, we have been warned. But I think most of the professionals involved are at a loss to say what we should do. The one thing that really got me in a campaigning mood was the fact that we have got to this position which we are today through the deceit and the lies of the industry itself. When I grew up, I had a free bottle of milk at school every day, a small bottle of milk. It was free to every child in Britain. Free school milk. Margaret Thatcher put an end to it. And we shouted and railed against her for doing that. But perhaps it was one of the good things she did. There weren't many, in my opinion. But it came out because there was some research back in about 1912, about 100 years ago. This is where it started. They did some research on rats. They discovered if you give rats more protein, they grow faster and bigger. So, conclusion, give babies more protein, they'll grow faster and bigger. Nobody questioned it. The dairy industry said, good. Milk's got protein in it, and it's got calcium as well for bones. And all of the nutrition information that was circulated around schools in America, and must have come across to Britain as well, was given free by the Dairy Board. Teachers lapped it up, free material. Yes, well, we love to have free material, we don't have to pay for it, we can stick posters up around the classroom, it's great. And my mother, when I was a child, believed in milk. People today, maybe you still, believe in milk. They said, I remember being told you could get rickets if you don't have enough calcium in your diet. That means you get bent legs because your bones are weak. Actually, if you drink lots of milk, on balance, you wash the calcium out of your body. Milk has calcium, but we don't need that much. We need some. But what we get if we drink lots of milk is also a lot of protein, and we have to deal with that. Our bodies have to deal with it. And to get rid of it, the process uses some calcium. And if we don't have enough available, our bodies are very clever. They find what they need from our bones. And our bones actually get weaker because we drink more milk, more protein, and because of the other protein, the other animal protein that we eat. We have to wash it out. It uses calcium. And nobody thought to say, well, okay, look, we need strong bones, but look at big animals, an elephant or a cow, for instance. The cow itself doesn't drink milk all its life. Most of its life it eats grass. Elephants eat the leaves off trees. None of the biggest animals, apart from the whale which eats shrimps, none of the big animals on land, at least, eat meat. It's not part of their diet, never has been. But an elephant's got strong bones, surely. And so does a cow. We don't need it. We don't need the extra calcium to produce strong bones. We can get it from vegetables. That got me annoyed. That did. Because we have been lied to because of some research on rats, and we are not rats. We don't grow twice our weight as babies in 4 days like rats do. And nobody thought to ask, how long do those rats live anyway? They found the rats they had made to grow faster actually died sooner as well. They didn't spread that news around. If anyone found out about it, well, they never told us. Holy Bible. I'm talking about something I feel is deeply a concern, should be a concern for every Christian around the world. With that caution, yes, Paul taught us to be respectful towards others with different opinions. And what I've discovered in the books I've been reading is the gentleness of the approach of every one of these writers. No condemnation, no judgment, mostly because they were among the carnivores themselves and changed. And they understand. And of course, we have to share our knowledge with understanding. But I believe that all these things that I've talked about are deeply Christian concerns, because we should be concerned for the whole of creation. We should be concerned for one another and of course for each other's health and well-being. That's very important. We should also be concerned for the animals. Were they intended by God to be our food? It doesn't say so in the creation story. In Genesis chapter 1, grain, seeds, fruit were intended as food for people. And also grass and leaves for animals. Alright, there are carnivores among the animals that couldn't possibly eat vegetables to save their lives. It would kill them. But there isn't a mention there in the Garden of Eden that people were supposed to go and kill animals. In fact, as I read through those first chapters, the only purpose in killing animals was for sacrifice to God. It had something to do with the relationship with God. Of course, for thousands of years people have hunted. It was there in the earliest days. But it's not written into our scripture that we have to eat animals. There are provisions about what animals we certainly shouldn't eat. Laws of Moses against that. But nothing that says you must eat meat. If there is, I haven't found it. And I think I've come to the crowning point of this, when I join with Jesus at his supper table. There's a transformation which I hadn't thought of in these terms before. Jesus is spoken of as the Lamb of God. The Lamb, the perfect Lamb that would be brought to the temple for sacrifice. And at the Passover meal, which Jesus was celebrating with his disciples, there would be lamb, sheep's meat on the table. But Jesus said there's no need for any more sacrifice, except this one. I am the bread of life, he said. He shared the bread as the sign of the sacrifice that he was about to make of himself. The rule he gives us to remember him by is not the sacrifice of animals, nor any other sacrifice in any temple, but that we should share his body in a symbolic way of eating bread together. Take that as the final word of Jesus on what we should eat. Because it was his final piece of advice, his final gift to us before he was taken to be crucified. Take, eat, he said, this is my body which is given for you. We do, in remembrance of him.